Reports are emerging that a rift is widening amid growing tension between Prince Harry and King Charles.
Harry expected awkwardness. He expected cold faces, careful words, perhaps even a difficult conversation waiting somewhere inside Clarence House. What he did not expect was to discover that the decision had already been made before he arrived. His security access, the quiet privilege that once allowed him through controlled royal entrances, had been cancelled overnight. No warning, no dramatic announcement, just one silent change that suddenly told him exactly where he stood. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry stepped toward the entrance believing everything had been cleared. Clarence House, the London residence closely associated with King Charles, was not simply another royal building. For him, it was tied to his father and to the fragile hope that family could still exist behind official walls. That was why the security officer's first pause felt so strange. The man checked the system once, then again, before finally looking up. Harry waited. The officer quietly told him his existing security authorization was no longer active. That authorization, the formal permission allowing someone through protected royal access points, had been removed from the palace system overnight. His credentials no longer opened the route he had used before. For a moment, he assumed there had been some technical error, but the officer simply repeated that the access status had changed. The humiliation arrived before the anger. Harry was standing outside a house connected to his own father, yet suddenly he required fresh approval to enter. Once, royal security had meant protection, belonging, and unquestioned passage. Now the same machinery felt like a line drawn across his path. He asked who had ordered the cancellation. The officer refused to discuss internal authorization and contacted a senior member of staff instead. Harry noticed the silence. Nobody rushed to call it a mistake. Nobody immediately restored the clearance. Inside, Charles was informed that his son had arrived and discovered the change at the door. The king understood how the moment would feel, yet he did not order security to reverse it. That hesitation transformed an administrative decision into something deeply personal. Harry finally received permission to enter under escorted access. He moved forward without another argument, but the message had landed. Someone had wanted the old privilege gone before he arrived, and nobody had warned him. As the door closed behind him, one thought became impossible to ignore. This was not about a faulty credential. It was about a boundary. Harry had crossed the doorway, but the greater question was waiting inside. Because canceling access was one thing, deciding who still belonged to the family was something else entirely. Every family rupture has a moment people later identify as the point when everything became irreversible. For Harry, that moment had seemed invisible until now. Weeks earlier, a private discussion had taken place after a tightly controlled royal gathering. No shouting reached the corridors. No announcement followed. But one exchange inside that room convinced William that an old assumption could no longer survive. Being family did not automatically mean receiving unrestricted access to every royal space. Harry had still been moving through parts of royal life according to expectations formed years earlier, when he served as a working royal, and access often felt automatic. But his role had changed, and so had the rules around him. Clarence House contained both family rooms and protected working areas, spaces controlled because private conversations, official material, and sensitive schedules could pass through them. That distinction mattered. What felt personal to Harry could look operational to everyone responsible for protecting the household. Harry had crossed that line weeks earlier. During a private family gathering at Clarence House, he was told that Charles was unavailable and that an aide would locate him. Instead of waiting, he moved toward a restricted corridor while searching for his father. William intercepted him before he went farther. The prince told his brother to stop and wait, while staff confirmed where the king was. Harry refused to accept the interruption so easily. William held his ground. Harry told him he did not need permission to find his own father. The future king answered that private areas could no longer be entered simply because they had once been familiar. For Harry, those words sounded like rank replacing brotherhood. His brother was not merely asking him to wait. He was redefining where Harry stood inside a family home. The resentment surfaced quickly. Harry challenged him again. William's expression hardened because he saw something very different in the confrontation. To him, the problem was no longer one corridor. It was Harry's refusal to accept that circumstances had changed. A boundary that disappeared whenever someone objected to it was not a boundary at all. The argument ended without shouting, but the silence afterward carried more danger than anger would have. William acted soon after. He requested a full review of legacy access privileges, the old permissions that remained from earlier royal roles, for family members no longer operating inside the working monarchy. The prince framed it as consistency, not punishment. Yet Harry would later understand exactly which encounter had pushed that review forward. Charles received the recommendation. The king could have stopped it. He did not. Instead, he allowed the process to continue, and that choice wounded Harry more deeply than William's confrontation ever had. His brother had challenged him. His father had permitted the challenge to become policy. Harry finally understood why his clearance disappeared overnight. But one question remained. Had William merely started the review, or had the prince actively fought to make the restriction permanent? That answer could only come from William himself, and when the brothers finally faced one another, neither was prepared to pretend the dispute was still about security. William did not raise his voice when Harry entered. Somehow, that made the moment worse. Months of frustration had been compressed into a conversation neither brother could escape, and both understood that politeness would only delay the inevitable. Harry wanted one answer. Had William deliberately arranged for his access to be cancelled? The prince wanted something harder from him, a recognition that the privileges of yesterday could not continue unchanged after trust itself had been damaged. Harry entered carrying anger that had already survived one confrontation with Charles. This was no longer a dispute between one man and palace procedure. It had become a fight between two brothers who no longer agreed on what loyalty meant. William saw security, confidentiality, and access as responsibilities tied to the future of the monarchy. The future king, meaning the royal expected to inherit the crown, believed those responsibilities could not bend whenever family emotion became difficult. William dismissed the aides. Harry waited until they were alone, then asked the question without softening it. "Did you have my clearance removed?" The prince did not look away. He said he had requested the security review and supported its recommendation that automatic access should end. He had not treated the decision as revenge, but neither had he opposed it. Harry reacted instantly. He accused his brother of allowing him to arrive at Clarence House unaware, only to discover the restriction from a security officer at the entrance. To him, the humiliation had been too precise to feel accidental. William rejected that charge. He said he had never instructed anyone to embarrass Harry, but he would not apologize for believing that protected areas now required prior approval. Harry pushed harder. The argument was no longer calm. He asked whether Charles could restore the old arrangement immediately if he chose. William answered that the king could intervene. Then came the part Harry had not wanted to hear. Their father had already been given that opportunity, and had chosen not to reverse the change. William watched the anger settle into something heavier. He told Harry that this was bigger than one corridor or one argument. Family affection and institutional trust had become two separate questions. The prince could still love his brother while believing that old privileges no longer matched present circumstances. Harry heard those words as confirmation of everything he feared, that the institution had become easier for William to defend than their relationship. Harry shoved his chair back and stood. William stayed seated for several long seconds before rising as well. Neither man walked away. That mattered. Beneath the bitterness, both still wanted the other to understand, even if neither was willing to surrender. Charles interrupted the deadlock with a request delivered through his private staff. The king wanted both sons together. He would hear them, and this time, there would be no uncertainty over who held the final authority. William had finally owned his part in the restriction, but only Charles could decide whether the boundary remained temporary or became the new reality. Charles had spent much of the conflict standing between two truths he could not reconcile. Harry was his son, and nothing inside a security database could erase that. William was also his son, and the man expected to carry the monarchy after him. Now both were waiting for a judgment. Charles could restore the old access arrangement with a simple instruction. Instead, he understood that doing so would solve one painful afternoon while reopening the deeper dispute that had caused it. Charles sat with the access review in front of him, while both sons waited nearby. As sovereign, the monarch who holds final authority over the royal household, he carried enormous influence over arrangements involving his own residence, even when trained security officers handled the practical details. He read the summary slowly, removed his glasses, folded the paper, and placed it down. Then he paused before looking at either Harry or William. Harry searched his father's face for reassurance. He expected Charles to acknowledge the pain, reverse the restriction, and restore the old arrangement. But the king did something harder. He said the revised access rules would remain. The words were calm, almost painfully controlled. Harry's anger did not explode this time. It seemed to collapse inward. The disappointment was quieter now, and because of that, more difficult to ignore. William watched his brother absorb the decision. The prince had supported tighter security and believed consistent rules were necessary, yet there was no sense of victory in the room. He had won the institutional argument, but seeing Harry wounded by their father's decision made that victory feel hollow. Charles noticed the tension between them and refused to let either son misunderstand what he was deciding. Charles made one distinction clear. Harry was not banned from Clarence House. He could still visit his father, but future entry would need to be arranged in advance and handled through approved security procedures, the formal steps used to control who enters protected royal spaces. The king explained that exceptions inherited from earlier circumstances could no longer continue simply because changing them caused emotional pain. Harry finally asked the question beneath every other question. Did being his son count for nothing? Charles answered without hesitation. It counted for everything personally. But it could not automatically determine every operational decision surrounding the monarchy. He added that he had approved the recommendation himself. William had supported the review, but the final responsibility did not belong to the prince alone. Harry understood the weight of that admission. His father had not been cornered into the decision. The monarch had chosen it. Harry left the room knowing the boundary would stand. Yet another consequence was already moving beyond those walls. Staff across the royal estate were receiving updated instructions about his future access. The family argument was over for the moment, but the administrative machinery had begun moving, and Harry was about to discover how far one quiet decision could reach. One cancelled credential could have been dismissed as a technical matter. A pattern could not. Within hours, Harry understood that the Clarence House incident represented a broader reset in the way the royal household would deal with him. Nothing theatrical happened. That was precisely what made it sting. Familiar shortcuts disappeared. Staff became more formal. Movements required confirmation. The invisible ease of belonging had been replaced by procedure, and procedure could feel colder than confrontation. Harry was still permitted to attend approved family meetings and agreed royal engagements, but spontaneous movement through protected residences had ended. The royal household, the staff and offices that managed the monarch's official and private arrangements, would now treat his visits through formal channels. That mattered because security had once been almost invisible to him. When trust felt natural, doors opened without thought. Now every checkpoint reminded him that the relationship behind those doors had changed. Harry prepared to leave Clarence House and instinctively turned toward the route he had used many times before. A member of staff stepped closer and quietly redirected him toward the escorted exit, listed under his new authorization. He stopped for a moment. Earlier, he might have challenged the instruction. This time, he simply nodded. The anger had begun giving way to something heavier. Fighting every employee would not change the decision. It would only turn private hurt into another public humiliation. Charles heard about that silence almost immediately. The king remained in another room when a member of staff informed him that his son had departed without causing difficulty. He asked one question: had Harry left calmly? When the answer came back yes, the monarch said nothing more. His son's restraint was harder to absorb than fury because it suggested Harry had understood the permanence of the boundary. Harry received another message shortly afterward. Future visits would need to be scheduled through designated staff rather than arranged informally at the last moment. The change was no longer merely about which entrance he used. It affected whether he could simply decide to see his father when emotion demanded it. Every meeting would now require planning, confirmation, and permission. William learned that Harry had complied without another confrontation. The prince had expected anger, perhaps even another accusation. Instead, his brother had walked away quietly. That unsettled him. Anger could be answered. Resignation was harder. Harry stared at the confirmation message alone. He began typing a response, stopped, deleted every word, and locked his phone. He had finally chosen silence over another battle. William recognized the significance of that choice. Before the distance hardened into something permanent, he decided the brothers needed one more conversation. Without Charles, without aides, without paperwork, and without security officers standing between them. The system had drawn its boundary. Now the two brothers had to decide whether that boundary would define their relationship as well. The second conversation began differently, because neither man had anything left to win. Harry's access would remain restricted. William's recommendation had been upheld. Charles had made the decision final. Without a policy to debate, the brothers were left with the harder subject: what had happened to them. No aides sat nearby. No official language softened the exchange. For once, William and Harry were forced to speak not as royal figures defending positions, but as brothers confronting loss. William knew the restriction was no longer negotiable. That mattered because it stripped away the easiest subject to argue about and exposed the deeper problem beneath it. Years of public disputes and private disappointments had trained both brothers to expect hidden motives from each other. Suspicion now arrived before affection. The prince understood that security rules were only the latest expression of a relationship already damaged by mistrust. William spoke first. He told Harry plainly that he had never wanted him humiliated at Clarence House. The future king, meaning the royal expected to inherit the crown, said his support for controlled access had never included a desire to make his brother discover the change from a security officer. Harry listened, then answered with equal restraint. Intent, he said, did not erase the experience of standing outside their father's home and realizing that a door once opened without question had suddenly closed. Harry's voice remained steady, but the hurt underneath it was unmistakable. He admitted that part of his anger had come from something he had not wanted to face. Somewhere inside him, he had still expected certain doors to open, because they always had. The old habits of belonging had survived long after his official circumstances changed. Recognizing that truth did not make the restriction easier, but it made his reaction harder to deny. William accepted the admission without using it as a victory. He told his brother that boundaries became necessary because neither man trusted the other's assumptions anymore. Harry assumed family connection should still carry practical weight. The prince assumed every informal exception carried a risk of becoming another argument. Their positions had hardened until even ordinary access felt symbolic. William then disclosed something Harry had not known. During the private review, he had opposed extending the restriction into a complete family ban. The prince supported advance approval and controlled entry, but not permanent exclusion from Charles. He had drawn a line around access while resisting a line around the father-son relationship. Harry absorbed that carefully. For the first time, he understood that his brother's decision contained a limit. William had restricted him, yes, but he had not tried to erase him. Harry made one final request. Next time, he wanted difficult news from family before hearing it from security. The prince quietly agreed. There was no embrace, no grand reconciliation, but neither man walked away angry. Inside the family, the temperature had finally fallen. Outside, the story was just beginning to explode. By morning, the quietest part of the entire episode had become the loudest. Harry had not been dragged from a palace. He had not been publicly expelled. Yet the image of a king's son arriving at Clarence House and discovering that his automatic security access had vanished captured something far larger than a technical change. To supporters, it looked cruel. To critics, it looked overdue. To the monarchy, it became proof that private boundaries could quickly become public symbols. Harry watched the argument spread faster than the family could contain it. Some saw Charles as a father protecting institutional standards, while others saw a fractured family allowing procedure to replace basic communication. Palace staff responded cautiously, stressing that security arrangements were routinely reviewed and that operational details, the practical rules governing protected access, would remain private. That restraint was designed to reduce pressure. Instead, the silence gave everyone else room to define the story for themselves. The public moment arrived with brutal simplicity. A fictional morning newspaper carried a front page dominated by the gates of Clarence House beneath the headline, "Harry locked out of old life." Hours later, a television broadcaster opened its royal segment by asking whether the cancelled clearance represented security procedure or a family boundary made visible. Suddenly, one interrupted arrival had become shorthand for years of unresolved pain. Harry felt the humiliation all over again. What had happened at the entrance had been private enough to hurt. Seeing it turned into national debate made that hurt harder to contain. Every future phone call, visit, or silence could now be interpreted as strategy. He understood that even reconciliation might look like surrender once the public started keeping score. Charles reacted differently, but no less emotionally. The king watched a broadcast shift from security procedure to the father-son relationship, then switched off the television before the discussion finished. He would not publicly attack Harry, but he also refused to reverse the decision, simply because the coverage had become uncomfortable. William saw another danger. The prince advised against issuing a defensive statement packed with security details. Explaining every procedure, he argued, would turn one private boundary into a prolonged public trial. The future king had defended the restriction inside the family. Now he believed silence was the only way to stop it becoming permanent theater. Harry made the same choice from the other side. He declined to publicly challenge the decision. There was no angry interview, no recorded statement, no attempt to force Charles or William into answering him through the press. His restraint changed the temperature. A small crowd still gathered near Clarence House as cameras assembled. Some expressed sympathy for Harry. Others insisted royal residences could not run on family sentiment alone. Once the noise faded, only the consequence remained. A door had closed automatically, but the family still had to decide whether they would keep opening it for one another deliberately. The final outcome was neither reconciliation nor exile. It was something harder, quieter, and perhaps more permanent. A new definition of the relationship. Harry would no longer move through Clarence House under the assumptions of his former life. His automatic security access would not be restored. William would not withdraw his support for the restriction. Charles would not overturn it. Yet none of them chose the harsher alternative of turning a procedural boundary into a complete personal separation. Harry finally understood what the decision meant in practical terms. His automatic security clearance, the standing permission that once allowed him to enter protected royal areas without fresh approval, remained cancelled. Future visits would require advanced coordination and approved entry procedures. But the distinction mattered. He was not permanently banned from seeing Charles, and the king was not severing the relationship with his son. The boundary concerned access. It did not erase family. Charles spoke with Harry privately one final time before his son left London. The monarch told him that Clarence House remained somewhere he could visit, but the way he entered it had changed. Harry did not reopen the argument. He listened. By then, he understood that the deepest loss was not a credential or a familiar doorway. It was the old certainty that he could return to royal life and expect everything to function as it once had. Charles carried his own painful conclusion. Loving Harry did not guarantee that every privilege attached to his former position could survive unchanged. The king had preserved contact, but he had also accepted that affection could no longer substitute for structure. That choice hurt precisely because it was deliberate. William reached a different kind of resolution. The prince maintained the boundary, yet he acknowledged that the way Harry discovered it had caused unnecessary pain. He agreed that future changes affecting his brother directly should, wherever possible, be communicated by family before becoming visible through procedure. The restriction would stand, but humiliation did not need to become part of enforcement. Harry left through the approved exit without confrontation. Charles did not follow him. William did not celebrate. That absence of victory became the final truth. Each man had protected something and surrendered something else. Harry lost unquestioned access to an earlier life. The future king secured the boundary he believed the monarchy required. Their father preserved contact with both sons without pretending the old family dynamic could simply be restored. The cancelled access had made an invisible truth impossible to ignore. Harry remained a son and a brother, but he could no longer move through the institution exactly as before. The family accepted a colder but clearer arrangement. Access would be requested, trust would have to be rebuilt, and connection would survive only when chosen deliberately. The door that failed to open that morning did not close Harry out of his family. It closed a chapter in which old privileges could stand in for trust. Sometimes a boundary is not the end of a relationship. Sometimes it is the only way that relationship has any chance of surviving. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.